Happy Sunday, everyone. It is another episode of Praise the Lore Sunday. It is your friendly neighborhood warlock and narrator for today, Gul'dan. On this episode of Praise the Lore, we'll be discussing one of the main villains in Warcraft, Gul'dan. This episode will cover the story of Gul'dan before his appearance in World of Warcraft, Warlords of Draenor. Without any further delay, let's jump into it. Gul'dan, like most orcs, was born on Draenor, but he was born weak and crippled, which made him a target for harassment and bullying among his clan. Despite being handicapped from birth, Gul'dan had dreams of power and admiration from his clan, the Shadowmoon clan. While Gul'dan is portrayed as a warlock in a spotlight in World of Warcraft, he was originally born a shaman. This was not a role Gul'dan wanted, and received beatings from the clan regularly for speaking out. When receiving a beating from the Shadowmoon clan, including the chieftain of his tribe, the clan shaman stopped them, placed his hand on Gul'dan's shoulder. Gul'dan, seek out the Throne of Elements. Perhaps they will help you find your destiny. He smacked the shaman's hand away, and the chieftain roared with anger. Gul'dan, you are banished from the Shadowmoon clan. Gul'dan left all that he had known. He wandered through the wastes, broken and starving. Perhaps the safety of the clan was better than this. After nearly dying in an encounter with a group of giant carrion birds, he took the advice of the elder shaman and sought out the blessing at the Throne of Elements. The elements surrounded Gul'dan, swirling him in rays of light. Just as the young shaman goes to reach out to touch the elements, they vanish. The elements had abandoned him. Gul'dan drops to his knees. All he had known had left him to rot in this world. Rain begins to fall from the sky. A single drop rolls off Gul'dan's head into a pool of water he was kneeling in front of. A mysterious voice calls out to him. Young shaman, I can offer you a gift. Immense power like you've never felt before. You will be the harbinger of fury. Gul'dan returned to his clan after receiving this gift. The chieftain approached him with anger in his eyes. You are banished, shaman. Your people no longer want you. Gul'dan erupted with anger. I have no people. He gripped the shaman's face, causing him to erupt and fell. He approaches the shaman that told him to seek out the Throne of Elements. He placed his hand on the shaman's shoulder, just as the shaman once did to him, and told him, Thank you, I have found my destiny. Gul'dan killed the shaman and claimed his staff. He burned his birthplace to the ground and never returned. The chieftain of the Shadowmoon clan and spiritual leaders of the orcs, Ner'zhul, saw Gul'dan's power and offered to mentor him. Ner'zhul rallied the orcs for a war against the Draenei after being commanded by an ancestor referred to as the Beautiful One. Ner'zhul slowly began to lose his touch with the elements, and one day was no longer able to call upon the elements of the ancestors. Sensing something was amiss, Ner'zhul went to Oshu'gun, the Mountain of Spirits. Ner'zhul calls to the spirits and asks why. Why have they forsaken him? He discovers that he has been duped. The ancestor who calls himself the Beautiful One is actually Kil'jaeden, having Ner'zhul start a war in his favor. Gul'dan has seen all of this, and tells Kil'jaeden that he has been discovered. Kil'jaeden approaches Gul'dan. Excellent work, Gul'dan. Bring the orcs under the banner of the Burning Legion, and I shall reward you with immense power. Gul'dan wasted no time, and began recruiting every orc he could find with the promise of more power in mind. Gul'dan amassed an army of orcs, and even chose a select few to be part of his Shadow Council. An elite group of powerful orcs that used their influence to distract anyone that spoke against Gul'dan or Kil'jaeden. Gul'dan and his army proved their strength by hunting the Draenei to near extinction. It was during this time that Gul'dan obtained one of his most loyal followers, Garona Half-Orcan, an assassin that was half-orc and half-Draenei. Gul'dan was contacted by Sargeras, who was using Medivh as a messenger. Gul'dan, I promise you godhood if you use your horde to conquer Azeroth. With your assistance, I can open the dark portal to Azeroth and send your horde through to the other side. Sargeras was still locked away in his tomb, a shadow of his former self. Without a body, Sargeras must rely on others to do his bidding for him. Gul'dan manipulated Blackhand into being the war chief of his new horde. Blackhand was an extremely intelligent tactician and competent in battle, but his lust for power made him easy to control. Gul'dan and his horde conquered most of the kingdoms of Azeroth. As Gul'dan marched his horde towards Stormwind, he sensed that the humans intended on doing something. Killed the guardian Medivh. Gul'dan entered Medivh's mind and scoured his thoughts for the location of the tomb of Sargeras, but to no avail. Lothar and Khadgar killed the guardian Medivh while Gul'dan was still in his mind, putting Gul'dan into a coma. Without Gul'dan by his side, Blackhand was easily slain by Ogrim Doomhammer. Doomhammer captured and tortured Gul'dan's assassin Garona into revealing information about the Shadow Council. Doomhammer made it his goal to eliminate the remaining warlocks of the Shadow Council and scatter Gul'dan's army. Doomhammer ultimately spared Gul'dan's life and did not hunt him down, despite his gut telling him otherwise. Gul'dan eventually woke from his coma, but finding only Cho'Gall, the Twilight Hammers, and his Necrolites were loyal to him. Doomhammer approached Gul'dan. "I let you live, and give you the land of Balor in exchange for information from the location of Blackhand's followers." Gul'dan accepted his proposal, and said to Doomhammer, "Blackhand's raiders Rend and Maim are preparing to join the Sons of Blackhand, and convince them to rise up against you." Gul'dan was unsure of whether this was true, but it seemed likely. Doomhammer heeded Gul'dan's words, and disbanded the raiders in fear that Rend and Maim may infiltrate the ranks. As a promise of loyalty to Doomhammer, Gul'dan and his Necrolites said they would find a way to resurrect the enemies fallen into Death Knights to fight for them. He failed many times, but eventually growing frustrated of the failed attempts found his own way to create the Death Knights. With the help of Cho'Gall, he performed a powerful ritual. At the height of the incantation, he slaughtered the Necrolites and stored their souls and gems. Gul'dan would put these gems into truncheons and bind them to the dead to create the feared Death Knights. While his promise to Doomhammer had been fulfilled, Death Knights were ultimately loyal to their creator. Doomhammer would eventually leave Gul'dan alone as he was preoccupied with the war. Doomhammer prepares to attack Lordaeron's capital, but finds that he's missing half his forces and is forced to retreat. Doomhammer vows to kill Gul'dan for betraying him. Gul'dan had other plans than to serve Ogrim Doomhammer. He took his horde and set sail for the tomb of Sargeras. He located the tomb on the ocean floor. Gul'dan used his powers to raise it from the depths and entered the tomb, remembering Sargeras' promise of godhood. What he found was not godhood, but an army of demons that tore his body to shreds. As he was being torn asunder, Gul'dan realized that, like Medivh, he too was just a pawn to Sargeras, lured in by the promise of power. Gul'dan's memories survived within the fell magic of his skull, along with the runes he painted on the walls of the tomb of Sargeras in his final moments. This skull is the iconic skull pictured with Illidan in the Burning Crusade when players raid the Black Temple. While the final powers of the skull were drained, Illidan can still use some of its power while it's in his possession. Illidan used the skull to locate the tomb of Sargeras, and Maev's Shadowsong discovered the runes left by Gul'dan. However, Gul'dan's last mark on this world was buried when the tomb caved in. So why is Gul'dan alive in World of Warcraft Legion? When Garrosh went back in time to Draenor, he essentially resurrected Gul'dan. While the Dark Portal had been closed, he managed to escape to Azeroth through a Legion portal he created. That's why the Legion suddenly got very powerful very quickly. So what do you think about the story of Gul'dan? Do you believe he is the ultimate villain in World of Warcraft? Or do you have a different opinion? If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you want to see future lore videos, be sure to hit that subscribe and bell button. What character from the Warcraft universe do you want to learn more about? Let me know in those comments down below. This has been Praise the Lore with Gubstep. I will see you next video.